Stippling Vaughn, and it is Saturday, so it's Saturday Stippling, or Stippling Saturday, I should say. And I am working on my Wraith of God piece. You can see where I've gotten some work done here. I was working on the rocks here. What I did was I created the rock face, created the rocks, and now going in and just hitting the rocks. And you can see how I'm doing it. I'm just going away at town, okay? And by doing this, this is what creates the texture in the rock face, because I'm just hammering away. It's not supposed. I'm not focused on the light and dark. I'm just like going in there. You can see where some areas already of this particular rock, it's laying down thicker and harder than other areas. So as a result, it's already creating the darkness. So you create your lights and darks just by rambling away and just hitting it, hitting it, hitting it. So I'd like to thank everybody for all of the views of my videos. It's been greatly appreciated. I'd like to thank you for the likes. Continue to hit that like button when you're done watching the video, or during the video, click it, help the algorithm. If you like what you're seeing and you like the content, always subscribe. And of course, if you like it, share it out. I am getting some people who are watching this or telling me that they're watching this on Facebook. If you're watching this on Facebook, please stop. Use the link to watch it on YouTube. If you watch it on Facebook, the view doesn't show up on YouTube. So I need you to please if you see the link to watch the video on Facebook, great. But when you go to watch the video, please don't watch it through Facebook. Watch it on YouTube. Okay, it helps out greatly. And I've been thinking a lot lately about everybody with how manga is doing so well. And I know the kids are really big into manga. I know, or manga, and a lot of them are getting into manga through anime. Okay? And for 8 years, I was a father to a little girl, and she was not into the comic books stuff. She just wasn't into it at all. She did get into the anime. She did get in the anime, which led into her getting into the manga. And I was like, why is it that this upcoming generation is so big into manga and not into American comics? And I realized it sometime this last week. And it's consistency. Okay? If you look at manga right now, okay, go into Barnes and Nobles and look at the manga books, okay? Overall, manga is consistent in its style. Okay? If you go back to all the stuff that was being produced 10 years ago, it has a consistency. If you go back 20 years, 30 years, okay, it still had a consistency. Okay, the perfect example is it didn't matter back in the late 80s, early 90s. It didn't matter whether you were reading All-Star Blazers, Captain Harlock, or Area 88. Okay, the artwork had a consistency about it. Okay, and Marvel and DC used to have a consistency. Okay, they had what was be considered a house style. Okay, Big John Buscema, he was pretty much with him, especially him and Stan Lee, doing How to Draw the Marvel Way. Okay, they set the tone for the style that artists would have for doing a Marvel book. Jose Luis Garcia Lopez, with him doing the style guide for DC. He pretty much was setting the tone for what the DC style was. Because you think about it, one of the things about him doing the style guide was if a new artist was coming in and they were doing the Justice League of America, what they do? They sent them the DC style guide because it had all the characters from the Justice League. Okay, if someone was doing Superman, what were they sent? They were sent the style guide. All that artwork was done by Jose. If there was then Dixie, okay, came up into them and said we want to do Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman paper plates. What were they? Well, they would send them. DC would send Dixie the DC style guide, and the DC style guide went. Not only did it have the character designs, it even went as far as showing, okay, when you go to print, this is the color blue that you use, this is the color red you use. Because back then, it didn't matter whether you were working for Marvel, DC, or Time Magazine. Well, maybe not Time Magazine, but most publishing companies, they all use the same color guides. Okay? So you take a look at it. So you think about it. Marvel and DC had a house style. Okay? Before Big John Byrne, there was John Romita. And before John Romita, there was Jack Kirby. And they all set the tone and style that all the upcoming artists would basically be asked to emulate. And they wouldn't be told flat out, hey, just do your best, John Buscema. They'd say, look at his dynamic poses, look at the energy he puts into it. Okay. Now we go to the late 80s, early 90s with the image creators. Okay. They had styles that were dramatically different. And they, again, set a new tone. When they all left Marvel, when Adam Kubert was now doing Wolverine, he was being pretty much said, hey, look at the energy that Mark Silvestri was doing. The person who was doing, I think it was Capullo and Panosian, replacing Rob Liefeld. They were being told the same thing. Look at the energy. They weren't saying mimic and ape their style. They're saying, look at the energy. That was one of the key things they said. Is look at the energy that the former artist was doing. We want you to provide us with that energy. And what ended up happening is, again, once Image started to fall by the wayside with sales, and they weren't getting the jobs, where did those artists go? They came to Marvel and DC. Many of them were bringing that style, that Wildstorm and Extreme Studios style with them, but DC and Marvel didn't want them to do that. They drummed it out of them, but they really didn't push into them to go back to a house style so the books all seem consistent. You take a look now, you can go into you look at a Marvel book or a DC book, and the artwork is so radically different from book to book to book that there's no consistency. Whereas manga has a level of consistency. So if you really want to look and see where Marvel and DC were losing, they lost it right there. Because manga is like, look, this is our style. This is how we want the books. You can have 10 different artists, okay, telling 10 completely different stories, but the artwork has a consistent feel to it. And that is one thing where I really feel overall where Marvel and DC lost their audience was they lost their identities. Not just in telling the stories, but also they lost their consistency in the artwork. If you watch like George Perez and his videos when he was doing Witchblade, he makes remarks about how he's never how like it's so how he misses the days when he was given shots of like turnarounds or front side back shots uh, uh, of the characters, okay, and how he really wasn't here. He was given reference, but it really wasn't great reference material for the angle he wanted because they only gave him like one shot of what the Witchblade looked like as a pirate. And Ethan, when he was doing the Convergence, and he was shown that he showed you guys this big fat binder of of just notes, but none of it was turnarounds or what I mean by that is where it gives you a drawing of the character from all three angles. Once they got away from a house style, so the books no longer had a consistent look and feel to them. That's where I feel really where these companies lost their identity. Because you'd have one person who they have a very abstract style, so they're not going to draw all the details on Robin's costume. And then you have someone who's ultra detailed, and they're putting in every single fold and seam, and so as a result, the costumes of the characters look completely different. That if someone's picking up a title and they don't have that rich history that a lot of fans do. So if you have a newcomer coming in, they'll pick up one book and go, okay, this is Robin. Pick up the next book, and they go through the whole book, and it's not till almost the end of the book, if so, that they realize that this exact same character they're looking at is Robin because there was no house style. There's nobody dictating that this is how the characters are to look. They're just... have at it, kids. Have at it, boys. Just do whatever you want. Oh, you're meeting the deadline? Good job. Oh, you're not meeting the deadline? Okay, we'll get somebody to help you out. I mean, you got to have a consistency in the look and feel. I mean, you take a look at everybody hated it when Jim Lee created the New 52 costumes because the armor plates in all the costumes, it was one of those where it's like Jim Lee didn't do a front view, a side view, and a back view. So there was like, well, how are these plates matching up? Because this doesn't make sense. And so as a result, the consistency in the artwork would suffer. And the fans would notice that. So for me personally, I look at where the comic book companies really lost the audience was when they lost their artistic identities, and the editors were not doing what they needed to do to get the best talent and to push that talent. That's one of the biggest things also I see with a lot of these books coming out. I look at it and it's like nobody's telling this artist that that's a bad face, you need to fix that face. Nobody's telling the artist that's a bad background. You need to do more to this background. You need to do this. They're not pushing these artists to be better. And so these artists, and I'm sorry, if you are going to be in a trade, and remember, comic book is a visual medium, but still it is a tradesman's career. It's commercial art, which means that you have to accept criticism. So if your boss comes up to you and says, you did these trees badly, you need to redo these trees, you can't fight with them and call them names and go behind their back. You have to look at it and you have to fix those trees. It'll make your work better. It'll make you better. You have to accept that criticism. Okay? I know I have to accept the criticism when people critique my work. Okay? I have to accept that. Okay? Now, if they're going to give me constructive criticism, great. And I'm going to take it and I'm going to run with it. If I have someone where I can tell that they're not giving me constructive criticism that they're putting me down to make themselves feel better, I can tell now. And the biggest thing also is this style that I do with doing the dots. Okay. I can't change that to meet the demands of the criticism. I've got to look at them saying, okay, this is too light, this is too dark, you need to come into a mid-ground between these. This is too light, this whole thing here needs to be darker. I know you put a lot of work in, there's a lot of push and pull between your lights and your darks, but because of this being your light source, and this is already established as really dark, you need to darken all of this, okay? That's the fact of the matter. I gotta darken, even though I like all this, I gotta darken this all here and then pull it in inside. Where am I going to do the pushing and the pulling so you can see these folds? If you're going to see all of them. You're not going to see all of them. Why? Because you have a harsh light source here, so you're going to have harsh lights and darks. Okay? It's something, this is a better example of harsh lights and darks. Okay? Your light, your dark, not much bleed between the two. Okay? But it still bleeds and it still blends. Okay? Light, not a single dot in there, harsh black. But you can make out that that's a fold. Okay? If it turns out that that's not working, black it out. Okay? You got to be able to accept these criticisms. So, that's my rant. That's where I feel that DC and Marvel are severely failing. Is they've lost their identity, while manga staying relatively consistent with their with the style. Okay, manga has its identity, and they do that very well. Okay, and for the American comic industry to succeed, if you're not an independent, if you're an independent, okay, Graham, Aaron, Ethan, they don't need to have the exact same style. Narwhal, no, he doesn't have to have their style, okay? But if Aaron and Graham and Ethan all worked for DC, if the editor comes in and tells them you need to change your style so your guys are, so all three of you are relatively consistent, guess what? They may not like it, but they know that that's what's expected of them to do their job. So that's how I feel about with Marvel and DC and why they're losing. So, and that's not even going into the whole story content. Okay, I'm just focusing on art-wise. Okay, but you really look, okay, if those companies want to be able to compete in today's market, not just against manga, but also against these independents, against Comicsgate, they've got to find their identity again, which means they've got to bring down the hammer on these artists and get the best work out of them. Because right now, they're not getting the best work out of them. They're getting absolutely nothing out of them. Okay? So, that's it for today. Remember, life is stressful. That's why you just take it all one dot at a time.